Hey, what's up guys, how's it going? It's Dan here from CryoNoir. I have a bit of a Dragon's Den kind of Shark Tank pitch for you now. This is just an idea that I've come up with. It's a bit of a sort of thought experiment that's just kind of kept rolling and rolling and rolling. And I think I've kind of come to a consensus in the different personalities that live within my brain. All seem to agree with this one idea and think it's a good idea. So it's now time for me to tell you it's a completely impractical idea. It's never going to happen. It's never going to come off. This is purely and simply just a thought exercise and just to see what you guys think about this. Now, it's all come about as a result of my retro collecting. I've been collecting for a couple of years now, building up quite a collection of sort of vintage and sort of more modern games. Currently I go right back to the NES up to the 360 and the PS3. I have no interest in the late stuff because that's all on PC now. But I think it came off the back of Steam, all the old good games that were on there, and I sort of get them and play them a little bit, and I was like, oh yeah, but part of the awesomeness of these was having the physical media itself. This will come up later on. This is more important later on, but that was one of the things that's already got me into it, and also seeing sort of cheap consoles like you can pick up an N64 for about 30-40 quid, and I was like, oh, the N64 was an amazing piece of hardware, really cool. Despite the way that Nintendo desperately tried to gimp it. But anyway, I sort of started really getting into this now, but one of the big problems with this is a phenomenon that's called disk rot, or otherwise known as data rot. I don't know. Well, it's basically what it is when you burn data onto a disk, onto like a DVD or a CD or something like that. From the moment you do it, the data starts to decay. It starts to erode. And depending on how well it was done and how cheaply it was done, depends on how quickly that process comes forth. Now, I've got some sort of CD rewritables that I did maybe sort of 10, 15 years ago, and they're pretty much completely unreadable now. You look at the discs look perfectly fine. There's no scratches on them, there's no blemishes, there's no problems, there's nothing there. But equally, you put them in a reader, and there's nothing there. The data has corrupted and has died and worn off so badly now that it's all gone. Now, this is a particularly prevalent issue, so I'm told, within the Sega Dreamcast. And obviously, some of these consoles are starting to really get on now. The PlayStation 1 and the Sega Saturn and things like that, they're starting to get old, sort of quite old. So it's a question of how long it'll be before these discs really start to go. Well, have they got another 5 years in them, another 10 years, another 20 years? Inevitably, they will rot, and eventually you won't be able to play the games. Now, if you've just spent sort of 4 or 5 quid on Die Hard Trilogy, it's not the end of the world if that goes. However, if you've just spent £300 or £400 on Panzer Dragoon Saga, you want to play it now, because who knows, you might eventually get round to it in sort of 10-15 years time, and it's unplayable. The discs might be perfectly fine, they've just eroded. Now, the one part of the market that isn't affected by that is cartridges. The cartridge-based media doesn't make any difference. It's all actually on the circuit boards. Within the PCB itself, you'll see that there are circuits, and the circuits have got the actual game code on them. Now, they last an awful lot longer, not to mention that the actual cartridge itself is an awful lot sturdier than a disc. But as long as you prevent the sort of copper contacts on the cartridge itself from breaking or from wearing or rusting, which is quite, it's a common, but is the major cause of them failing, or potentially if they've got a battery backup, for save games and things like that, as long as you make sure that battery doesn't burst and leak battery acid all over the PCB, generally they will go on forever, and they will go on sort of 30-40 years. I mean, you can get Atari 2600 games. I mean, they were out in the 70s, so they're knocking on 40 years old, and they're perfectly fine, not skipping a beat, not a single problem with them. Whereas there are Dreamcast games out there now, and that's a much newer machine, much newer machine, and they're already starting to suffer from disk rot. Another thing that I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier is the physical media aspects of it. you get sort of games for like the Saturn and the 360 and the PS3 and all that kind of stuff, and they effectively just look like DVD cases, and they're okay and they're alright. Nintendo completely dropped the ball with this by just making these cardboard cases, which everyone eventually just threw out. However, Sega, when you look at particularly the Sega Mega Drive or the Genesis, if you're of the American persuasion, they are really cool. They display really well. They're really good cases. You get a nice big thick chunky manual. You get the thing that I think they really hit the nail on the head with the 16-bit console and the cases and just everything about it. The aesthetics were always marvelous. Some of the artwork on the front, like look up the artwork for Golden Axe 2 and Golden Axe 1. And it's unbelievable. It's really good. But proper cheesy 80s art. And I was just thinking, wow, that's really good. I really like that, and I really miss that physical media aspect of it. A lot of the games now that I buy, sort of AAA games and stuff like that, I get them from Steam. I get no physical copy of it. I just literally get a little icon that appears on my desktop, and I effectively just indefinitely rent that game from Steam. If Windows chooses to do some sort of update that cripples it, I'm then relying on the developers to patch that in, which is currently a problem for Fallout 3, and it's also a huge problem for GTA 4. Like, I wanted to play GTA 4 on my PC so bad. I played it a lot on the 360. I've still got it on the 360, and yeah, I really enjoyed that game. I loved it. But it runs at a staggering 20 frames a second or 30 frames a second, and the draw distance is a little ropey and all that kind of stuff. And I'd love that game to get the treatment that GTA 5 got on the PC. It's on the PC and it's fine, but you have to jump through so many hoops, and it needs to be tied to a Windows Live account and so on. Just all sorts of stuff. So you're constantly beholden to that as well. Any major changes to the architecture or to the operating system that you're trying to launch it in, and it might just be a useless game. And this is also becoming a problem with the PS3, the PS4, and stuff like that, and the Xbox One again. With them constantly having to update and do things like that and have like online DRM. In sort of 20-30 years time, when Microsoft decide that they're no longer going to support the servers for the Xbox One or the Xbox 360, if you've got online arcade games for that, that's gone. So that money you've spent and how good the games they are, they're gone. You don't have this problem with the older stuff as long as it's in good condition and you can get the consoles. And some of the older stuff you do need to run it in CRT tellies unless you buy a scaler, but that can all work. Effectively, it's yours. You've got it forever, and as long as it doesn't rot or rust, it's fine. You can still use it. So I started thinking about all the shortcuts that are sort of made today with regards to sort of gaming. And the whole kind of release it broken, patch it later sort of mentality that developers are having, which again was something that didn't really happen back then. Well, no, it didn't happen back then because there was no online. The Mega Drive, the N64, all that, they didn't go online generally. So when a game was released, it was either released, finished, and pretty much, I won't say perfect, but as good as it's going to be. And that was fine, or it was released a buggy crappy mess and everyone hated it and it didn't sell, and that was that. So, and I also, when I was talking to some guys in my local game, they were saying that a lot of the discs that you get for the modern consoles, effectively they're just install discs. Much like the old sort of 90s PCs and stuff, you would get the game, you would install the bulk of it onto your hard drive, and then that was that. And the big problem is a lot of these consoles only come with a 500 gig hard drive. It's very quick for you to use up an awful lot of that space. Now, I suspect, I don't know, but reading between the lines, but I suspect the main reason for that is that CPUs and GPUs can run so fast now that the DVD readers and writers cannot keep up. So they can't store all the data of the game on a physical medium like that anymore, and then get it off quick enough for the modern gaming. They can't do it. So you have to install it on the hard drives, which run an awful lot faster, so they have access to all the info that they need to reduce loading times, but also just for on-the-fly calculations, pulling data off it on the fly, like textures and things like that. They need to be running an awful lot quicker. So I thought, well, right, okay, that's another fucking piece of shit that the modern gaming industry is going through. And then I also got back to thinking about the N64 and about how that was competing with the CD-based market and how it couldn't keep up. But because I'm collecting mostly stuff that's cartridge-based now. I got a real affinity for the old cartridge because that's what I was playing when I was growing up, and I prefer the cartridge-based stuff to the CD-based stuff anyway. However, I'm well aware that obviously the pinnacle of cartridge-based consoles was, until very recently, was the N64. And obviously things have come an awful long way since the N64, and the PS2 was considerably better, horsepower-wise was, considerably better. And then again, obviously you've had the 360 and the PS3, and now the Xbone and the PS4. So I'm like, you are kind of limiting yourself there. That the cartridge-based media kind of stopped. And I was like, well, it was doomed to die. It was destined to die anyway, because the amount of storage that they could get on the N64 cartridges was absolutely tiny compared to what they could do with the CD-ROMs, and that's why everyone went over to CD-ROM. I mean, that's why Square Enix ditched Nintendo to go over to release the Final Fantasy series on PlayStation, because it was going to take like 6 cartridges or something to get the whole of Final Fantasy VII on. Those problems don't exist anymore. Like flash storage, you can get stupid amounts of storage in a tiny little form factor, and it's really quick as well. It's like, oh. So there's nothing to stop cartridge-based games anymore being, well, in fact, better potentially than disc-based gaming. Now I know you've got the obvious problem of everything's going online now. Digital distribution is taking over, and it is, and it's very much a possibility that the next generation of consoles, if there even is a next generation of consoles, will potentially not even have a disc drive on them. There will literally there will be no optical media whatsoever. There'll be no input. It will all be done through downloads, and then obviously the next level from that is where all the compute is done on major server farms and everything, and effectively your console is just a dumb terminal. Again, I can't say I'm a huge fan of these ideas. All it takes is the terminals to go down or something like that. You've spent 40, 50 quid, 60 quid, or $60 on a brand new game, and you can't play it. You can't play it for maybe 2, 3 days, 4 days, 10 days. We all know what happened with Lizard Squad and the PlayStation Network. We all know the problems that SimCity had at launch and the problems that Diablo had at launch. And it was all directly related to servers not working and stuff like that. Again, you'd never had that in the old days with the consoles, with the cartridge base. You plug the thing in, turn it on. If it worked, well, no, if it didn't work, it was because it was fucking broken, and you would take it back and exchange it. It was never a case of, oh, you can't get on because of the servers, you can't get on because of this, and oh, by the way, there's this huge down update you need to upload, and all that kind of stuff. So, like, could there be a market? Could there be a resurgence for cartridge-based consoles? And I just thought, hang on. Would that not be a better idea than any of the other possibilities that we're doing? Okay, and the more I thought about it, the more I kind of came convinced in my own stupidity that this is the way forwards, right? So just hear me out. You will have obviously the increased cost of shipping and the increased cost of the media themselves, but flash storage has got an awful lot cheaper nowadays. Now, it's still nowhere near as cheap as DVDs or anything like that, but you can pick up 120 gig or even a 32 gig flash storage drive relatively cheaply, and that's just as retail. Obviously the retailers are getting from the wholesalers cheaper, and the wholesalers are getting it from the manufacturers cheaper still. So if you're someone like Sony or Microsoft and you're like, oh, we need to buy 50 50 50 million like 120 gig flash drives or whatever to put in our new cartridges, then you could do that an awful lot cheaper. You could probably still get them for pennies and halfpennies or whatever. The cartridge manufacturing costs, I reckon, even if they were being real bastards and they wanted to make profit on the manufacturing themselves, it's only going to add maybe another £5 to the actual game, maybe £5 to £10 to the game if you were to buy it from a store, the distribution that way. So I'm like, so that's not really a huge concern. And I started thinking, well, consoles do outperform PCs pound for pound. Now I know that's a very, very controversial thing to say, but they do. They just do. Okay? PC development is absolutely amazing, and it's my favourite platform. It just is. Okay? But there are so many variants and so many different possible iterations, and you could be running this OS using this graphics card with this amount of RAM, with this CPU, with this GPU, running on this motherboard, and then times that by hundreds and hundreds of different variations. You've effectively got thousands. So whenever developers are making games for the PC, they have to kind of make them broad. They have to optimize them in the most broadest possible ways. Whereas consoles, another factor is obviously PCs are multiple purpose machines. Even the most dedicated gaming machine is not a purpose-built gaming machine. It still has regular DDR4 in it, or DDR4 now, for running the operating system. Windows as an operating system is not a gaming operating system. It is a general purpose operating system, and it's designed for doing everything. Whereas a gaming operating system can be totally focused on maximizing performance and streamlining that. Then you've also got the actual hardware development. If you kind of think back to, a perfect example of this is the ill-fated Atari Jaguar. Now the Atari Jaguar had two 32-bit processors in it, separate 32-bit processors with a 16-bit processor in the middle that would then theoretically divvy up the information between the two processors so they could do their own little thing that it got from the cartridge. And you think that that's effectively plugging into the PCB, so it's actually a direct access to the motherboard, and then it goes all to a CPU, a smallish CPU, which then splits stuff up to the other CPUs. That's almost what hyperthreading does now, only it was doing it back in the 90s, and it was for a purpose-built machine that was just designed for gaming. Now, that actually didn't work out very well, but that was entirely Atari's fault. They did a particularly bad job with the development tools for developers, and it wasn't very well explained, and none of them really got it to work. So as a result, what a lot of them did is they just wrote games that would work on the 16-bit CPU at the beginning, or maybe it would utilize one of the 32 bits, and there was almost no games out there that was actually firing both CPUs at the same time, doing independent things. It just didn't really happen. But that was, Atari's fault. But you don't get that in modern PCs. You can't go out and buy a gaming machine that has two separate CPUs, or even if you're like, oh yeah, well it's got two graphics cards running in SLI and stuff like that. Yes, they are, but it's all done through software, and they're not designed. They don't work. There's a reason why Nvidia has now sort of effectively completely run 3 or 4 graphics card SLI setups like into the ground. They don't work, and you can do it off the shelf with 2, but and you have to buy the extra wide data, the extra wide bridge, for the higher bandwidth on the bridge, and it doesn't scale properly or anything like that. And this is all because you're bolting onto what are all-purpose machines, graphics cards, right, to handle the 3D rendering. Whereas with a console, if you build it right, you are building it from the ground up to purely and simply output visual media as fast as possible, to render polygons, to render textures, and to work physics, and to do that. And that's all it runs, to generate sounds. And that's effectively all it has to do. Now, you only have to look at a perfect example is the 360. If you look at the launch titles for the 360 and then look at the titles that were at the end of the 360's lifespan, and they're almost a different console. Now that machine hasn't got any smarter. It's not the processors haven't suddenly got a load faster or anything like that, but because it's one standard and it's specifically designed for gaming, the developers can really hammer at it and just get better and better and better and better at eking every last little ounce of performance out of that machine, that the end results can be loads better than they were at the beginning. Again, you don't generally get that with PCs. If anything, it's gone the other way. What happens is the manufacturers just start throwing more and more of a frame buffer in the graphics cards, which is why we've not got graphics cards. Like literally in the space of a year or 2 years, we went from graphics cards that had 2 gigs of VRAM to 12. And that's, you know, you can't tell me that games have suddenly require 6 times as much of a frame buffer. They just don't, because they haven't got 6 times faster in the processor. In the GPU processing power, they haven't got 6 times faster there, so they aren't chewing through that data 6 times faster. It's much easier because video RAM's cheap, so it just sticks 12 gigs on there, and that's fine. We don't have to worry about optimizing that. So my proposal for the world's greatest console would be some form of flash-based cartridge. Now, like DVD readers, right, or DVDs, dual-sided, they can store a total of 9.5 gigs, right, and even a 24-speed reader can only get the data off there at about 31 to 32 megabytes per second, okay? Flash storage, if you're running SATA 3 flash storage, that can run at 530 megabytes a second if you're running it through SATA 3, like on a flash drive. So that's, a significant increase on what you can get off a DVD drive. And again, I mean, you can then look at sort of USB Type-C and things like that. Well, they can do the new Thunderbolt, is it, or USB Type-C Gen 3 can do 40 gigabit per second, which works out at 5,000 gigabytes per second of data. 5,000 megabytes per second of data. 5,000. So on a DVD drive, you've got 31.68 versus 5,000. Okay, now that's a ridiculous amount of data that you could then pull off that cartridge. So you would build a console that would have maybe a really small hard drive built into it, a really small flash-based hard drive, maybe a 120, 128 or something like that gig hard drive. Now that would literally just have a purpose-built gaming operating system built into it. Okay, that would take up maybe 4 or 5 gigs. That would leave you with 200. Oh, we'd also need to build up space for a page file, which is fine, but you're not going to need, you're not going to have 50 gigs worth of RAM in there, so you'll be perfectly fine on a really hefty sized page file. And then the rest of it is just for saving game progress, or maybe you want to put a 250 in or something like that, and that's fine. And then all the games come on flash-based cartridges that have got multiple USB Type 3 connectors as like the actual thing that slots into the machine itself, and they slot directly into the PCB. So let's say you've got 4. Yeah, let's use 4. So you've got 4 USB Type-Cs, or if you want to save money, go to USB 3.0. I mean, that's still really, really fucking fast. Really, really fucking fast compared to DVDs, and even compared to sort of some flash storage. That's still very, very fast. So you're running 4 USB Type 3s or Type-Cs. And then off each one of those, they run directly along the PCB onto separate independent CPUs and GPUs. So then everything would just then all just... And if you got developers on board with that, holy fucking shit. The amount of storage that they would have, they would not be crippled by like, oh well, we can store a total of about 10 gigs on the DVD, so we might have to launch it on a couple of discs or whatever. In fact, no, double-sided, it's got to be more than 10. Actually, I think I looked this up. Yeah, it's about 50. So yeah, a double-sided DVD nowadays is about 50 gigs. That's how come you can get games like GTA 5 on there, which are about 35-40 gigs all in. So that's so. But you're then saying, oh well, you actually effectively you have no limit on space at all. You can put as much data on there as you want for the textures. It doesn't make any difference. If we have to put, even if we put in a 128, that's still significantly bigger than a DVD. So you don't have to worry about storage. And then you get developers working with the same system over and over and over again, where they've got 4 lines of traffic going down to 4 CPUs at blistering speeds. Seriously guys, you give like some AAA developers that to play with permanently, then holy shit, you want to see some jumps in performance going from year 1 to year 3 to year 5 to year 10. It would be unbelievable what they will be able to do with that. And then also you package them in nice fucking boxes with decent manuals. The games will last forever and will become collectible items for time immemorial. And more importantly, you have next to no internet access. Internet on that machine will be based purely and simply for online gaming, not for. In fact, I would be a real stickler for this. I'll be like, once it's burned to a cartridge, that's it. There's no day 1 patch, no day 2 patch, no ongoing patches. You do not release a game and print it to a cartridge until it is done. And that would immediately, if you put those caveats on there and people were still willing to play ball with you, like if you were someone like Microsoft or Sony and you put those caveats in there and said that's that, then I can guarantee you, publishers like EA and Ubisoft and stuff like that, they would back down. They would have to back down, and then as a result, then games would get released, actually completed and finished, and you would get these awesome cartridges, and the cartridges would have excellent artwork on, and they would be fucking amazing. So, but anyway, that's just my idea. That's just my thoughts on the whole thing. I'd love to hear what you think. I've rambled on about this now for about 25-30 minutes. But I think it's a fucking amazing idea. I think it's absolutely wicked. I'd love to see the return of cartridges. And you can kind of see Nintendo have sort of felt fairly similar, because the the Switch now uses little flash-based memory cards as its main media device. I mean, they're still fucking hamstrung it by putting in a stupid fucking portable, but yet not quite portable, with a caddy with stupid analog things form factor. But that's Nintendo, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, as always. But yeah, I think this idea has legs. I think this idea is the way forwards, and I'm expecting a phone call from an exec at Microsoft or Sony any day now. Any day now. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Take it easy. You can come back on Sunday. I will be doing a devlog. It'll be quite a bit shorter than this. I've been working quite a lot on my little game recently. So catch up with me on Sunday for a devlog, and I shall see you then. Alright, take it easy, guys. Bye-bye.